2 years ago, maybe, when I had just moved to another part of this city. It was pretty much a construction site. And so I would come back from work and pick up my daughter from nursery. And by the time we get home, the guys who are working in the construction site are wrapping up and picking up their vans to leave. So that day, we got out of our car, and one of the guys was picking up, but he was smoking marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
And I could smell it in the air. And although the person who abused me did not smoke marijuana, I associate marijuana with some lack of control of oneself.
Yeah.
This is not to judge anybody who uses it, but that's how it's formed in my mind. So my daughter ran to that man to greet him, saying, "Uncle, uncle." And then the man walked into the house he was finishing working on, and my daughter followed. I lost it. I lost all guard, all control, and started screaming like a mad woman, running after my child. And I got in there. I don't know whether I knocked the guy or whatever I did, and picked up my child and ran out screaming and opened the door to my house. We got in and sat down. I could not stop crying. Physically, I could not stop myself crying. I ended up having to call a friend because it was nearing an hour and I still couldn't stop crying. And my friend drove from wherever she was coming from to my house. I still could not stop crying. The child was not yet fed because I had a replay of something that happened to me, and I thought this man was going to take my child and abuse them, and I didn't want that to happen. I've gone through healing, but different situations you come across in life may open up a different aspect of that wound that you didn't know before.
Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Tolu Akinyemi. It's a privilege to share the same space with you. If this is your first time here on this channel, I share thoughts that can help women rise above limiting beliefs, get comfortable with their emotions, have healthier conversations with themselves, and be everything that God has called them to be, and that is to be whole. Today, we are going to be sharing about unspoken truths on sex abuse, healing and wholeness. I have an amazing guest with me today, and we are going to be going deep into this conversation. Don't forget to stay till to the end. Let me just introduce my guest speaker. Her name is Dr. Annette Moyo. She's a mother, a doctor, a woman of faith who has walked through the challenges of everyday life, divorce, the realities of solo parenting, while holding on to purpose and rediscovering herself along the way. From this, I'm sure you know that this is someone who has a wealth of experience to share from. With over a decade of experience as a medical doctor, she now works as a GP partner who allows her story of resilience, healing, and grace that shapes her most. In recent years, she's learned to rebuild from the inside out, navigating solo parenting, managing career demands, and embracing wholeness in Christ. She shares openly about her journey of personal loss, healing, and living boldly. Even when the picture doesn't look like the plan, she's passionate about encouraging women to own their stories, heal deeply, and rise again with faith, wisdom, and joy. Give it up for my amazing guest, Dr. Annette Moyo. She said I should call her Annette, so let's go. It's so amazing. It's lovely to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoy this tonight. Remember to hit the subscribe button. I never get to say that in my everyday life, but you can subscribe tonight.
Yes, you heard that. Subscribe tonight. Okay, so we are talking about the unspoken truths on sex abuse, healing, and wholeness. So I want you to share with us, what exactly is sex abuse? At what point did you become aware of what sex abuse is?
Okay. So I think we can start with abuse. as a word. And I think abuse is any use that is not aligned with the purpose of a thing. So if we're going to talk about abuse, it means we need to first understand the purpose of a thing. And then we will know how it should be used. And then we will know when it is abused or misused.
That's right.
So when we come to talk about sexual abuse, there's all sorts of definitions from the WHO, from different countries define it differently, to the extent that there are things that can happen in the context of relationships that may be felt by whoever is experiencing them as abuse. But in some countries, in the eyes of the law, it's normal, it's not abuse. But when we talk about sexual abuse, especially in this context, in this conversation today, we are talking about any act that is done to another that is sexual. It does not necessarily have to be intercourse. It's not intercourse only. It can be touching. It can be conversation. It can be making somebody do something. So we will be talking about grooming. In that context, we're talking about things that people can be made to do, for example, to create social media content, which is sexual or which is intimate without consent. And we'll talk a lot about consent and what it means. So what I just want to say here is that it's not just rape that is sexual abuse, because there are people who've been made to believe that whatever it is that they've experienced that felt like abuse, they've been told to shut up about it because it did not look like rape. Now, sexual abuse is not just rape, and it doesn't need to be justified. If it feels like it, then it is. So you asked me at what age I became aware of what sexual abuse is. So I experienced sexual abuse from a very young age. From when I was about 6 years old. It went on almost on a daily basis for 3 years from when I was 6 years old.
That's so young.
That is very young. It makes me angry when I look back, because I feel that before I could make choices about my body, choices were already being
taken
made
away from you.
You're right. Choices being taken away from me already. But at that time, I didn't know that it was sexual abuse because I wasn't having that conversation with anybody. I wasn't telling anyone. And it wasn't something that was talked about in the culture that I grew up in, and also in the different contexts, like at school and things like that. It wasn't really talked about. So I didn't have the words to describe it. So I didn't know sexual abuse in that way. But it felt wrong. From the day it happened, it felt wrong.
I think there's just that instinctive thing about sex that just makes you, even if you can't place it, you can't describe it, you just know something is off.
Yeah. So I couldn't define it then, but I knew that it was wrong. And I was only able to tell somebody for the first time when I was about, in UK terms, probably year 8.
At what age is that?
That's about 14, because I had started secondary school. That was when I was able to tell somebody for the first time.
Wow.
And they told me that that was abuse.
From 6 to 14. Wow.
to me, it speaks to the things that we should be aware of now when we are the parent generation, the kinds of conversations that we should be having with our children. Of course, they will not live the same lives we lived.
Definitely.
And that's one truth. And I'll come back to this when we talk about other things later. But I had to tell myself many times when I learned I was going to have a baby girl, I had to remind myself that she was not going to live my life. I was afraid. I was very afraid of having a child who is a girl, because a part of me still believed she was going to live my life and that life was going to be difficult. And I didn't know if I had the right skills to protect her from the life that I had. So we'll dig deeper.
Yes, we'll dig deeper. And I think a lot of people always talk about people who abuse, especially children. A lot of times they are not always strangers. There'll be people that have easy access to the children, and then it makes you start questioning. Sometimes I've seen someone who said online that she cannot allow her husband to bathe her baby girl. And you can see how the extreme is coming in. That's your husband. He's not shown any sign of, anything off on a good day. But because maybe based on her experience or what she's heard, she's brought that into. So I can relate to how this thing affects us in different ways, in different instances. And so I just want us to talk about the impact of it, the psychological impact of sexual abuse. What happens to a child, say for instance, who is abused? What happens?
So you will see that a lot of the examples that I will give will be from my own experience. But in working as a medical doctor, but in fact, in being an abuse survivor, because how I came out of the abusive situation was that at the end of year 3, I passed very well, and my mother decided I was going to go to boarding school.
Wow.
So she just made this unilateral decision and took me out of the home where I was living, and put me in boarding school. And that's how I escaped. But when I went to boarding school, I could actually, looking at other children, I could see who was abused and who wasn't. Because I could see a lot of myself. And when I eventually grew the boldness to ask, I would ask one subtle question, and a child my age or even older would just break down and tell me that, yes, I am abused, so and so is doing this to me. But that was much later that I had the boldness to ask. So I think some of the impact that it had on me is that, one, I was switched on emotionally. I was switched on. So it meant that it could go either way. It could be switching on in a very positive way that was helpful for others, which is what it became for me when I grew the boldness. But in my patients that I see every day, they are switched on emotionally the other way sometimes, and they are very angry people. They are emotionally unstable. They may end up abusing substances, alcohol, recreational drugs. They may abuse other people. They may be at risk of becoming depressed and even having psychotic symptoms. It can go very deep. The other thing that you've already alluded to is where then when we are going through or observing our children going through their lives, we may tend to replay what happened to us. We may tend to recreate those situations so that we see them in almost everything. That is why you will have somebody who will think, my husband cannot bathe my daughter, because they are feeling that way. I had a situation like that myself in the last, I think, 2 years ago, maybe, when I had just moved to another part of this city. It was pretty much a construction site. And so I would come back from work and pick up my daughter from nursery. And by the time we get home, the guys who are working in the construction site are wrapping up and picking up their vans to leave. So that day, we got out of our car, and one of the guys was picking up, but he was smoking marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
And I could smell it in the air. And although the person who abused me did not smoke marijuana, I associate marijuana with some lack of control of oneself.
Yeah.
This is not to judge anybody who uses it, but that's how it's formed in my mind. So my daughter ran to that man to greet him, saying, "Uncle, uncle." And then the man walked into the house he was finishing working on, and my daughter followed. I lost it. I lost all guard, all control, and started screaming like a mad woman, running after my child. And I got in there. I don't know whether I knocked the guy or whatever I did, and picked up my child and ran out screaming and opened the door to my house. We got in and sat down. I could not stop crying. Physically, I could not stop myself crying. I ended up having to call a friend because it was nearing an hour and I still couldn't stop crying. And my friend drove from wherever she was coming from to my house. I still could not stop crying. The child was not yet fed because I had a replay of something that happened to me, and I thought this man was going to take my child and abuse them, and I didn't want that to happen. I've gone through healing, but different situations you come across in life may open up a different aspect of that wound that you didn't know before. And when that happens, you need to revisit it and make sure that the wound is cleaned, is dug up nicely, cleaned up, pegged up with Inadine, and dressed. Somebody needs to take care of the wound.
Yeah.
You can't do it alone if it shows up the way it showed up for me. You need somebody else to come in and take care of that wound and clean it up until it is perfectly healed again. And then another situation may bring it up. Yeah. Those are the psychological and emotional wounds that may keep coming up even when you are healed.
I think that is very instructive, because what you said now is you can be healed in a way, but then something else brings another side to it. So it's almost like the healing is not just a place where you feel I'm healed.
Yes.
It's a journey. And I think the fact that it's happened way early in life, it will take longer because it's happened at a point where you've not even learned to process anything. Your prefrontal cortex is not yet fully formed.
Yeah.
It's just a lot. And like you said, if there is a wound, it will show up another time. And it just shows that you need to go back and clean again. It doesn't mean you're not making progress.
No.
It doesn't mean you're going backwards. No. Because sometimes there's something I always say, because I'm always interested in things that have to do with emotions.
Yeah.
I used to be very moody growing up. So I learned to journal a lot. I learned to put my thoughts down, get out of my head. I learned to do all those things. So sometimes I'm sure my husband will be like, what kind of girl is this? What's your problem? What's your problem? But it's just like, he said I'm not making progress. I am. I'm getting a lot more comfortable with my emotions. And that's why the whole women thing exists, to help people get comfortable. Because sometimes you push them away. And when you have experiences, they don't disappear. They are somewhere. The experience you had, you won't even have amnesia. Even if you forget, it's still somewhere in your subconscious, and something will trigger it. You might meet someone who does something. They haven't done anything to you outrightly, but they seem to waken something else on the inside of you. You are just angry at this person. There's a way he talks, there's a way he moves, there's a way he does, that is just connecting to something in your subconscious and is bringing something else out. As it's coming out, you know that I have a lot of work to do. So ladies, this whole self-development, this whole inner work thing, it's a journey. It's something that you have to keep going on and on and on and on.
It is a journey. It is a journey.
I want us to talk about shame. Because imagine this is an experience that you had from the age of 6. First time talking about it was 14. This was 2 years ago when this happened to you that you were crying profusely. That's a lot of years in between. So many experiences. Did you ever have to deal with shame at any point?
Yes. Yes, I had to deal with shame in many places. In fact, shame is an experience I'm very familiar with. First of all, at the time when I was young and these things were happening, I knew that it was wrong. I didn't know how to tell anyone because it was my maternal relative who was doing it. And I felt that if I talked about it, my mother would get into trouble. So I bore the shame of this experience to protect my mother.
At that age?
At that age. When I was preparing to get married, that was one of the things that I had to talk about with the man who was going to get to marry me, because it did leave scars, not just emotional scars, but physically there were things that changed about me that meant, for example, I struggled with fertility in my marriage.
Wow.
And the investigations we did actually linked it all the way back to those experiences. Because young as I was getting STIs and I didn't know that I was getting STIs. And therefore suffered the complications of those sexually transmitted infections. And I didn't know it. But it changed my anatomy so that then I was not able to easily fall pregnant. So before I got married, I had to talk about this with the man that I was going to marry. Unfortunately, sometimes you trust people with these truths and they don't handle them with the respect that they should. So again, I suffered shame while I was married, having these things re-said to me as though it was my fault or my own doing.
And that's another thing. It's not my fault.
No.
It's not your fault.
No.
People can blame the victim as if it's your fault. As a 6-year-old, what do you know? I have an almost 6-year-old. He's just jumping up and down, carefree.
Yeah.
He's just jumping up and down. I can't begin to comprehend that kind of experience. And to be honest, I always pray that nobody born out of a woman is permitted to abuse my child.
Yeah.
Wow.
So shame, even now, you know, I talk about this now. The enemy will try to cover it with shame, to make it sound like it's something we can't talk about. But now I know that my story is a redeeming story. And I tell it with boldness, without fear. And I tell my story exactly as how I experienced it. So you see, when you are 6 years old, you may not remember detail about this and that. This happened almost every day for 3 years. So even if I don't remember the detail about yesterday, it will happen again today and the next day. And the experience is etched in my heart and in my memory. I know it happened. When the enemy tries to tell me something else that brings shame, I have a truth with which to challenge him. But now my truth is better because I've come to understand that Christ actually went to the cross. He shed his blood to cover me and to write a different story about me. So that shame is gone. In fact, the enemy can say as loudly as he wants whatever he wants to say. That shame is gone. I don't own it. I don't carry it. I don't identify with it. I don't even give it a day in my life. And it's the same thing I want to say to anybody who's experienced abuse of any kind. Even if you were abused as a grown woman by somebody who had permission to be in your life, but not your consent to do the particular activity that you felt was abuse, you do not have to carry the shame because it's not your fault. When somebody abuses you, the shame is on them. Whether they did it knowing or not knowing that they were abusing you, it is still abuse and it will never be your fault. Even if you made the decisions that made you end up in the environment and context where that abuse happened, you are only responsible for those decisions, but not the actual act of abuse. And you can actually change those decisions and make sure in the future you do not make decisions that leave you in a place where you are vulnerable to somebody else. But even after you've taken every care to not be abused, if you are still abused, it's not your fault. So don't carry the shame.
Still on shame. You know, sometimes you go through an experience and it looks like the core of your identity is shame. Do you understand? Do you get the core? It looks like the core of your identity is like it's shame-based. Can you share how you got to a point where you could challenge that shame or that identity with the truth of Christ?
So I think for me, what was most helpful was that the first person that I spoke to about the experience I had had was actually a Christian teacher at the boarding school where I was. I was in Form 2, that's the second year of secondary school. And I shared it with her. I was born again by this time. I shared it with her, and she taught me to pray for healing. She taught me to pray against abuse and being abused in general, to break curses. And one of the things that I learned in that time was to actually find my identity in the Word of God. So it was at that time that I learned that I am precious and honored in God's sight. It was in that time that I committed scriptures to memory that that sealed my identity in Him, that I understood that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. That's the time that I understood that I was formed first in the mind of God before I was knit together in my mother's womb. So I was made for God's purposes, and that there were God's purposes in my life that could not be thwarted by the abuse that I had encountered.
Yeah.
So it was leaning into that truth that helped me. Trust me, there are times as an adult when somebody says something that seeks to awaken that shame, that I have to actually physically, as they are talking, I start to talk to myself and say, Annette, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are made after the image of God.
Yes.
In fact, you are the very expression of God's mind on earth. I have to say that to myself physically to challenge that thought and that word that has been said. Otherwise, it will take root. Not because their word is powerful, but because I have an experience that could agree
with what
they are saying. So I have to be extra deliberate about the things that I say to myself. In fact, I am very deliberate about the things that I allow pass through my ears and my mind because of that.
You know, for some reason, when people say positive words to you, they don't stick as much as when something negative is said. Because you remember, you may have all positive reviews and someone just says something that seems to want to stand out. So it brings to life the scripture that says, guard your heart with all diligence.
Yes.
Because anything can seep in. And I love the fact that you said you have to say to yourself physically. One of the things I'm trying to push with this channel is us women having healthier conversations with themselves. Because if you pay attention to what is going on inside, maybe for some people, confidence comes naturally. They haven't had experiences that damaged them at any point in time. Life could have been good to you in one way or the other, you know, and you don't have that. But for some other people, the inner voice is very harsh. It will agree with experiences you've had. And if somebody now comes who does not, who is not cultured in any way and decides to address that, it will just keep agreeing, and you just realize that the conversations inside is horrible. Even you as a person will not want to say those kind of things to somebody else. How much more saying it to yourself? And then you meet with people who end up projecting the negativity inside on other people. You meet some women, they are so mean and harsh, and you'll be wondering at what point. But I know life experiences have molded this person to be this way.
In fact, the what you're saying there, I absolutely agree with, because there are times when we are tempted to just be cynical. We meet people and we think, what's wrong with this person? You know, and we brush them off, or we say whatever negative words we said, and because we feel that they are deserving of that kind of judgment. The things that I've experienced, both as a child, as an adult, stop me from judging that way, because I understand that a lot of times I'm yet to meet people who have become negative and vile simply because that's who they are. A lot of people, it's been a mold that they've gone through, life experiences they've had that have resulted in the person that we see today. And all they needed was probably somebody to address the life experiences they've had and help reframe their mind and therefore their life, so that they can be a different person to who they've become.
That's very deep. I think another thing is you see that you really can't do life alone. If you're on a journey of healing. You can't do it by yourself. You can't do it alone. There's a place of God. There's a place of you putting in the work. There's a place of other people coming in together to stand with you. There's something else I want us to just touch on briefly about the psychological effects. Do you think, yes, we've said abuse is abuse, but for someone who's experienced it repeatedly, and for someone who's had probably a one-off experience, do you think someone with like a one-off experience, do you think it can have as much damage internally as someone who's had it repeatedly?
Yes. In fact, it's difficult to measure the extent of damage, because we can't put it in a sack and say this is 2 kgs of damage, this is 5 kilos of damage. I'll give an example. If you had twins, children born from the same mother, same father, slept in the same womb
sack
at the same time, and they live in your house and you're their mother, and they live, maybe they do not get breakfast every day because mommy can't afford it. those two children from that one experience can become two different people. The one child may learn from the fact that we didn't have breakfast because mommy couldn't afford it, can learn life skills or be determined to learn the life skills that can help her to ensure she never gets through that lack. The other child, on the other hand, can be very angry at life, at their parent for the lack that they suffered and not learn anything about that experience to avoid it, and in fact end up as an adult in lack and underprivileged because of the experience they went through.
And just keep blaming.
So that one experience can create out of people that should really be the same because they're twins. They're literally one egg split in two, can create two different people. So even when somebody experiences abuse, they may experience it once, they may experience it 10 times. It will not have the same impact that it will have on the other person. So we cannot compare our experiences. We need to respect somebody when they talk about that one experience they had, as much as we respect the person who's gone from abuse to abuse, because it is all abuse. And it can create different results in different people, depending on how they are wired, depending on how they think, depending on what they've learned, and all of these things.
That's true. Thank you for pointing that out. So I think some other psychological effects it could have on people. Do you think it freezes your emotional growth somehow? Because sometimes you may have an experience, or let me just say personally, I had an experience when I was 5. It was just somebody in university that tried to molest me at that point. I didn't know what it is, but in my 5-year-old way, I was able to tell my mom. I remember my dad so angry, carried me on his shoulders. We went to their house and he was talking. I can't remember the content of the conversation. I just have memories of him carrying me, going there. And the person was trying to deny it. And he said, "You mean a 5-year-old is saying this?" Because she was just able to pick what I was trying to say from the little way I was able to explain it. And sometimes that memory is there. I can say there are lots of things that happened when I was 7, when I was 8, that I have no memories of, that I can't even remember. But that one still stands out. Does it freeze some part of your memory? Does it freeze some part of your memory that it just looks like you're not remembering some other things? Does it stunt you emotionally? Does it just keep you? Does it do anything like that? Do you know?
So I would say bad experiences like that can remain in the memory simply because they were bad or that they had that much impact. In fact, I was almost in tears as you were talking because you had an adult that listened. In fact, they did more than listen. They acted. And they went in a very dramatic way that you can still remember to challenge that person, even if they tried to deny it. I had adults in my life that did not see that I was going through an abusive experience that was actually changing me. So you see, when other children came back from school at that age, they would play outside.
They're happy.
They are happy.
Jumping.
They're playing everywhere. I didn't play. I didn't go outside. I stayed in the yard and I played with the vegetables in my grandmother's garden. They were lined up like this and I would stand in front of them and I was the headmistress. And I would knock their heads and beat them up until they are split. The leaves are split like this, and they were shaking. No one picked up that that was an abused child. There was something wrong because I never played. I used to wet the bed. In fact, I wet the bed until I was in the 4th year of secondary school. I was head girl at a secondary school, wetting the bed. No one picked up that it was because I was abused. I was biting my nails. I've bitten my nails forever. I was a nervous child. No one picked up on it. I am so grateful for your dad. And I pray that we would have more adults who are awake so that even when a child is speaking in a language that does not make sense, they don't have the proper words, they can pick it up. But what I was going to say about memory is that the brain works in a very funny way. There are things it will store and will not understand why it's storing. There are things that it will forget as a protective mechanism.
Sure.
I was in a very difficult marriage. There were days when we would go to sit down to talk, maybe for, it was supposed to be counseling.
Yeah.
And I would be asked some detail about something that would have happened that we are supposed to be talking about. And my brain would be blank. It's called selective amnesia. And I would not be able to remember anything.
Yeah.
So the brain works in a very funny way because some things can be so vivid like they happened yesterday. In fact, your brain can remember it so well that your body today can react the same way you should have reacted back then. And you can start to sweat, you can break in a run, you can start to have palpitations as though it's happening now. The brain is a very, very funny thing. It's a very funny thing.
Oh my God. Thank you. When you were talking, I had one question. It's escaped me now, but
I should have given you a pen.
I'm sure I'll remember at some point. Okay, why do you think some women normalize abuse or don't just speak it? Okay, I think I remember what I wanted to say. When we were talking about parents being able to pick things, what are some of the signs that we'll see that you can pick on? Because a lot of us would have children. A lot of us, I remember for the longest time, because of that experience, I didn't want to have a female child because it was just somewhere stored in my head for real that I'm not sure I have the capacity. But as I grew older and as I started working on my relationship with God helping me, I started to feel that if God gives me a girl, He believes I have the capacity to care for the girl. So I just left it at that. So what are the things that we can, the signs we can pick up on? And then after that, we'll talk about the healing journey, what it is like.
So, I mean, the signs can be very different. I think bottom line is that the adults, whether they are parents or just guardians, should learn, study their child so that when there is a change, they will know it. Because different children do react to things differently. My young brother and I, we lost our mother when we were when I was 16. My young brother was 12. I grieved and grew. His life went downhill from that time. He's worked so hard now as an adult to pick himself up. But really, things went south for him. He became emotionally unstable. He didn't enjoy school anymore. Didn't do well at school because of it. Started to drink and started to smoke. And he's had to work his way out of that as an adult.
That's just what you were talking about. Two twins. When you're talking about twins, experiencing the same thing and then having different outcomes.
Yeah, but there are easy things that behavioral changes that you may see in children. For example, the easiest one, bedwetting. If a child has been completely toilet trained, if they start bedwetting, when there is no urinary tract infection and there's nothing else.
And it's not just a one-off thing.
And it's not just a one-off thing. Something has changed. They are either stressed about something or whatever. It's not always abuse, but when they are abused, that could be one of the signs. They may change in their personality. If they had previously been a reserved child, they may become more reserved and depressed, or they may suddenly be outspoken and trying to be friends with everybody and whatever, even if it looks positive. It's a change in their personality that a wise parent would do well to look at and see whether it means anything. Nervous children, nail biting. A lot of children suck their fingers, thumbs for comfort. But there are some children who end up self-harming because of abusive experiences, suicidal tendencies, abuse of alcohol, recreational drugs. Some children end up just letting loose sexually.
Yeah.
And being a little bit more carefree about their sexual engagement. That could be a sign. So a lot of things, but I think the bottom line is that we do well as adults to study and learn the children we have so that we will know when there is a change.
And there's a change. You have a chatty child, and then for some reason they're getting moody, they're not talking as they used to. Everybody is playing, they want to lock themselves up in the room. I know sometimes people pick up habits, like sometimes masturbation, sometimes they start watching pornography.
Yes.
Sometimes, like you said, they become very sexually loose. You know, it just shows up in different ways. Some people is bottled up anger. Any little thing, that anger is there. It's just repressed, waiting for the opportunity to just come up. So I think that's very important. We need to pay attention to our children, pay attention to these little things. Let's talk about healing and recovery, what it is like. What are some of the tools that you feel can empower people who have gone through this experience? Because it's somewhere stored inside of you. Some people are affected when it comes to intimacy with their partners. Someone can say, oh, if my husband just touches me like this, you know, he just knows something is wrong. Maybe you've not had the courage to open up, or you should open up anyway if you're getting married to someone, because you're going in not with the intention of it's not really being deceptive, it's just being open and transparent. Building that trust with your partner. That's what it is supposed to be anyway. Building trust, except, you know, in some instances, some people would have tried, like you said earlier, and then it just turns out to be a weapon instead of a place of a safe net for you. So some people struggle with intimacy. They don't want their spouse to touch them, or if you touch them suddenly, you can see that thing, and then it brings up a memory in that woman. How do you think people can navigate abuse if they've experienced it?
Okay.
Also, if you probably have a child who has experienced something like that, what are practical ways that you can help the child to ensure that they, should I say, turn out right? So my question is in two parts now. One is for the adult who's gone through it, going on a journey or starting a journey of recovery. That is one. Two is when you have a child who has gone through that experience, beyond being dramatic, beyond being that level, something has happened with that child. How can we help this child as they're growing up? We don't want it to form the identity.
No, we don't want it.
We don't want it to form the identity of the child. But we want to help them such that they grow up as regular children, just enjoy their life. How can we navigate that?
So you say beyond the drama. To be honest, I'll start with the drama. I think that drama must happen.
Yes.
I say that more to African families. That drama must happen. It doesn't happen enough. That is why a lot of people go through abusive situations and never talk about it, because no one ever stands up for them and fights with them against what's happened to them. So I think that drama
As you said
should
that,
happen.
I just remembered one of my friends.
Yeah.
She's someone who, if a child is having a conversation with someone,
Yeah.
or maybe children are playing and the adult is trying to force them to do
Yeah.
something or do something like that, or maybe someone just speaks to you in an unkind way, she's someone that will say, call a child and say, was that person kind to you? And says, no, it wasn't kind. Then you don't have to do it. You're so standing up. And she said something that struck me. She said, a lot of us wish that when we're children, when aunties were bullying us or doing things like that, somebody stood up for us.
Yeah.
And she's doing that with her child.
Yeah. And that's very important. I mean, our children are different to us because sometimes they interpret that drama as drama.
Yes.
And they think, oh, you're being too much. But honestly, whatever form that takes, stand up for your child. Stand up for your sister. Stand up for your friend. Because a lot of us as friends, our friends come and confide in us.
Yeah.
That, there is something like this going on. And we cry together. And we finish and that's it. That's the end. No, we need to stand up. Sometimes that standing up even means to the extent of suggesting they could take it to the law. Because it's against the law. Enough about the drama of that day.
Yeah.
I think for me as a child, it would have been helpful if somebody had given me the space to talk about it.
Okay.
So I think creating the space starts before the abuse starts. Making the relationship between you and your child a safe space starts before the abuse happens. So we need to be actively nurturing our relationships with our children so that if there ever was something difficult happening that needed to be talked about, they would not feel it a secret to keep to themselves, but rather they would come to you and talk to you about it. So we need to be actively building up that safe environment with our children in our relationships. And sometimes, to be honest, as African parents, especially if you're a single mom like I am, I think I'm the strictest person in my daughter's life. So she may not feel as comfortable talking to me about it, even when I've tried the most that I can to create a safe space. So one of the ways to create that safe space and enlarge it is to allow other responsible adults into that child's life.
I love that.
Every day.
I love that because it takes a community.
It takes a community
to raise a
it's
child.
A village, yes. And we cannot have everything that our children need for them to come out right.
Yeah.
We are not silos.
Yes.
We cannot be. So we need to create that space so that even if they don't come to me, I know they will talk to somebody. They will talk to my friend who's become their aunt. They'll talk to my auntie who's become their grandma. They'll talk to, they have someone to talk to. That's very important.
I love that. I love that. I love it. We are becoming more of a society where it's just me and my family. Me and my family. Nobody can talk. But we need to identify like minds.
Yes.
That we know that if I'm not there, this person will correct my child.
Yeah.